Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues and listeners, here we are again. We've got a lovely podcast ahead of us with a guest who's been on before and who's now made a change in his career. So the guest I'm talking about is Kam Weng Woo, and it's the Woo that's important because that's how we're known to him and he's known to us. So Woo, absolutely lovely to have you back again, sir.
Chris, great to see you. Great to see you, and under very difficult circumstances, but hey, technology helps.
Yeah, it does indeed. It does indeed. Now, Woo, just to let everybody know, and they might have remembered the session that we had, but you were with Post Aviation. So if you want to just give us a little bit of a briefing on Post Aviation, what they did, and then how you've now come to be with MMAG.
Yeah, so, well, I was with Post Aviation, and of course, COVID hit. And towards the end of 2020, we already put in place a number of contingencies to carry Post Aviation through. What we anticipated then, the end of the pandemic, somewhere in 2021, early 2022. And of course, then there was an option for me to take an early retirement. So I decided to do that. And I must say, I really appreciate what they did for me. And I took the option, I took the package, and I retired. But after 3 to 4 weeks, I think I got itchy, and someone approached me, and I met somebody, and the owner says, "Why don't I put you on my board?" And I found out they were developing an integrated logistics solution.
Yep.
And it was perfect fit. And I'm an independent non-executive director on the board of MMAG Holdings. And they have a courier service, they have a line haul, last mile delivery, and then they introduced in June a 737-400 freighter, and the 737-800 freighter will be on board end of October. Yeah.
Very good, very good. And we should also say where your location is now.
Well, we are still based out of Kuala Lumpur International Airport in Malaysia.
Yep.
Yeah, and currently the 737-400 is operating domestic routes.
Okay, and then you'll have a regional option when the second freighter comes on.
Yeah, with that range, I think we can reach up to the North Asia, the China and the Japans. Yeah,
very good. Now, another thing that we just need to let everybody know, unfortunately, Malaysia, like way back, was one of the stars of the show with the way they were dealing with things. But now you're going through a very, very difficult time indeed, not just with the pandemic, but also on government level and all local levels. So pretty tough, huh?
Yeah, I think unfortunately the pandemic situation is not that good yet. When you look at numbers, obviously, we are having about 20,000 new cases a day, and is stabilizing. Vaccination rates, however, have accelerated very well. I've gotten both my jabs, and I think we are covering about 40% of the population with both jabs. And by the end of the year, we should have up to 80%, and that's the target, to have the number of adults vaccinated fully. In between everything, of course, we decided we have a new PM as of this week, Prime Minister.
Yep.
So there are some uncertainties and some policy changes, which actually has impacted some of the e-commerce businesses here. So yeah, it's challenging times, and I think it's during these challenging times that I think we all have to learn from the experience.
Yeah, that's one of the things, everything that happens, as long as you're learning, you're moving forward. But now you said that it had an impact on the e-commerce sector, particular. In what way, Woo?
Well, the previous, let's pull it back to March 2020. We had a change in government then as well. And the policy we had was that we wanted to make Malaysia the regional hub for e-commerce. And we had some big boys here called Shopee, Lazada, that wanted to bring their inventory into Malaysia. and then Malaysia will distribute out to ASEAN.
Yeah.
But one of the cornerstones of this policy was to have this how they call reduced tax process. Yeah. And we could bring it from the seaport to the airport. All goods come into the country or vice versa, and there will be no customs approval process until it leaves the country. That has changed. So everything that comes into the country has to go through the customs process first before it moves. So that has created this uncertainty, and some of these so-called big plans have been put on hold for Malaysia as the regional hub.
Okay, so without the free zone and the concessions, it doesn't make it, doesn't make it worthwhile.
Yeah, the process is, I mean, the impact from, say, a numbers point of view, when we had the free customs process movement, the taxes that we had to pay for those that we brought directly into the country was, say, 200,000 ringgit. Without that policy, we have to put up front 2.5 million. So it doesn't make a lot of business sense to have so much bureaucracy and financial cash flow in a difficult time.
But obviously they're going through a difficult time, so the government's trying to raise as much money as it can. So it's a seesaw paradox.
You hit it on the nail. They just needed the cash.
Yeah, it's crazy times, and it's one's very short term, another one is something for the sustainability moving forward. But everybody's faced with it. But the good thing is, experience isn't going down the drain, Woo. So you're keeping all that experience in, and now MMAG are going to get the benefits from it. Now, something that I know that you're very, very passionate about was learning and developing and having opportunities for people who might not have even thought that they had the capabilities, because there's always something in everybody that just needs that spark to set off and then to burn brightly with the right guidance. So as far as you're concerned, one of the things that businesses needed to look at coming out of a crisis, and a major crisis like this pandemic, is how did COVID influence you personally, to look at the business in a different way, and what did you feel was necessary? So once you had your retirement, most people would say, and I'm sure your friends and family, Woo, just relax, man, chill out, lay back, start to enjoy life a little. But there's a certain type of person that if it's still in you, you have a hunger and you want to be part of something. So what did you think this pandemic has done to make an opportunity to do something that's been there for so long, but differently?
Well, even when we were running Post Aviation, we always had contingencies, right? We had planning, scenario planning, and so on. And I still remember on my whiteboard, I had in the corner of the whiteboard, I have put there, economic downturn, world trade wars between China and US, and things like that would cause a 25% drop in business. And that was our disaster. But never in our mind could we have predicted something called COVID and the impact of reducing revenues up to 80%. So what I felt that I've seen a lot of value destroyed in a lot of good companies. And I think maybe whilst we are in the middle of the pandemic, I think it's a good time for companies to make use of their best talents and develop them so that the company is ready to take on the opportunities that come when there's a recovery. Of course, our recovery was initially 18 months, then it went to 24 months, and now I don't think anyone really knows when the recovery will really come in and how it will look like, even when the recovery comes. So what I'm saying is that the leaders of the future, the leaders that will create the continuing business and make sure that the business survives, has to have this ability to foresee and to imagine what the future is. And having gone through COVID, maybe I can share some of my experience and maybe I won't say teach, I won't use the word teach, but
Coach.
share the experience, whereby in any case, when you look at anything, you must be able to take your mind beyond the current paradigms, and then people need to change the paradigms. And future foresight, I think, is the competitive edge for successful business in the future, to be able to foresee what the future is like and to craft the the path there.
Yep. Yep. No, I totally agree. And they always say never waste a good crisis. And one of the things that if you look at all the businesses and the way they've been hit, and obviously training companies, I was doing a podcast with a colleague of mine, Steve Dixon, and that previous week I got 51 contacts by training companies, saying about their training, why it was so necessary, etc., etc. And to be fair to them, when you take it separately and you look at it, each of those training courses makes sense, structured well, very professional. It really is good. However, one of the problems I think that people have got to start to address now is that doesn't matter how good a training course is, unless it's specifically linked to a regulatory compliance issue. Those training courses, if you look at them after 3 months and try and remember everything that you could about that course, you'll probably have forgotten 60 to 70%. If you then look at it in 6 months' time and think, when you did that 3-month review, was there anything that you really, really wanted to consider? That'll come down to maybe 10 or 15%. And then if you were to do it again in 9 months and say, right, what areas must I 100% include in my next year's action plan or strategy? Probably be around 5 to 8% if you're lucky. That's the best of training courses. And I'm talking about like management, leadership, all those sort of areas. Now, if that's the case, then surely there's a case for senior managers to get a better return on investment, to reduce the amount of time that they're taken out of the classroom, so that people can actually see that the right people for the right reasons are taken out, but for a very short period of time. And then between the competency verification, there could or should be some blended elements that they have to do in their own time. And then at a given time in the future, that's when you test them to see if they've retained that competency. And I think then managers who are going through a crisis, worrying about cash flow, worrying about, next month's or next quarter's targets and revenues issues, they would be more inclined to pay for that training if they could see a return on investment.
Yes. Very true. Very true. But I think, as you said, a lot of training is based also on certainty, known facts.
Yes.
But it's very difficult to tell people who are in day-to-day business, running day-to-day operations, and if they are successful at something, to say that, look, what if tomorrow something else changes? Yep. Can you imagine what it will be like? And to break through that paradigm is not easy. But as you said, it maybe as a kind of training, I would say maybe use the word training is not so much of the key word, but it's experience sharing and maybe coaching. Yeah.
No, I agree. That's where it's going to come across. Now, something else that I've also been thinking about, Woo, and I'm just wondering whether you agree with it or not, is if you look at the sports that has been taking place, and especially football. I know how Malaysians love their soccer and their football. Now, if you look at some of the results and the statistics, more teams won away from home than ever before, and more teams lost at home than ever before. And one of the reasons being is they didn't have a crowd, they didn't have supporters.
Yes.
Now, if you want to perform and get the benefit of a home crowd, your supporters, that's something that also now needs to be recoached in businesses, because all of us have got a boss somewhere, and you have to learn to be led, but you also have to learn to support those that are under the pressures now, which are very different, to actually lead. So there's a totally different dynamic now of how to teach, fast trackers or or high potentials or whatever you want to call them. And I think what you're talking there about the foresight, that also makes that difference for people who might have been good in a standard environment. You might be a different type of person now in this non-standard environment.
Yeah, and what we begin with is, of course, we talk about certain attributes and certain things about attitude, about able to think for yourself and for others. And one of the cornerstones of that is, of course, one of the habits, which is begin with the end in mind. So if you can imagine what the end is going to be like, then you can influence whatever happens between now and what you foresee and adapt as you go along. But as you rightly said, without the crowd, that made a lot of difference in football team's performance. But at the end of the day, it has to be down to the individual without all the external influences, right? So how does one lift yourself up? So what we're trying to tell people is that you have to break through your paradigms, see things differently, be very open to ideas. And nowadays you have all these, I'm learning acronyms every day. What does this mean? What does that mean? Someone sent me something as SAAS. So I thought Secret Air Services. No, it was what you call subscribe to a cloud service,
Yeah.
So there are so many things new now, and we all have to learn. And if you look at business leaders who have been so entrenched in the current business, which is doing well, very stable, and they don't think beyond anything. And that's the biggest danger. And what hit a lot of people during COVID was exactly this. The companies that started to adapt to IR 4.0 and digitalize did it much better than those who were still in their own way, doing whatever they used to do.
Yep. And some were doing things that they didn't realize how much benefit it would bring, and others, were thinking that everything would just go along as normal. And big shock. It's nobody now can sort of say, well, this will happen, because as of COVID, there is no history.
Yeah. So and more importantly, I think you hit it when you talk about football. Why some small teams can suddenly do well in a certain match, because they have a lot of data, and they do use the data to find the solutions, and maybe mark one guy out of the game or whatever it is, and certain tactics to employ versus certain teams, and suddenly it all works. It might work one time, might not work the second time, but then it did work. And it's all due to data science. So the more information, more data we have, and the more we crunch it through, then we can make better decisions. And I guess the days when, business leaders that you used to talk to, I guess, and I used to deal, even myself, sometimes they say, how do you make the decision? Experience, gut feel, instinct. May not work in the future.
I think you're right. I think that experience, instinct, and gut feel will be a decider when you're faced with several options. But those options can only come from data-driven decision making. That's such a powerful now ingredient into the success of any masterpiece. It's incredible. Now, when you're talking about the areas that are necessary, you mentioned about self-leadership, exploration, and discovery, and these types of areas, they haven't been developed in the past as much as they now need to, because the new leaders now, and it doesn't matter whether it's age, gender, whatever it is, I'm not suggesting there's any difference whatsoever. If a person is the best for that particular position, then irrespective of anything else, that person should be given it. But that person today is very different than that person 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So this way of being able to look at things like, now you've got all these anxieties and guilts and various other things that you've got to contend with within a workforce. That's so new. So people need to be able to address that, but they need to be able to address it with a freedom, Woo, not with restrictions. And I think there's far too many restrictions from society coming now. And we've got to be very careful that we don't go overboard with quotas. And diversity is a hugely important thing. And the past might not have been the best, but it was the start of the journey that got us to where we are. And now those that are here can influence the rest. So, you know, that leadership, you know, exploration and discovery, that also has to be guided in a logical, practical way.
I agree, but you know, in a lot of companies, I guess at the end of the day, there's always this if the leader, the top man in an organization doesn't have these beliefs of making mistakes is a way of being better.
Yep.
And not encouraging people, irrespective of age or
yep.
creed or whatever, to find out what's the best fit for this person. This person might not do well in where he is or she is, but suddenly if you put the person in another department where the skill is so evident, then they might shine. And having that, how do you say, environment, as you say, is very critical, but it's not easy.
Yep.
Because everyone is so worried about making the mistake that will cost millions, right?
Yeah, no. I totally agree. But I think the culture, like a just culture, and a culture where people are encouraged, fail early but learn faster, and that's what people need. But equally, I think there's never now been more importance on leading by example. So, and you look at the industry that we've been in, Woo, like with safety, everybody will stand up, including yourself in your previous position and me in previous position. You say, yep, safety and security are the two most important pillars of our business. Okay, but there should be a little bit of subtext under that says, provided we're still making money. And the commercial element is still a major driver inside. So when employees come to a company that they've only seen from outside and they see the brand, the logo, they see these messages, when they come in, if it doesn't live up to what their expectations were, you then end up with nepotism, fear, you're not sure. And that causes such a degradation of people's own personal values and satisfaction. And life is far too short to be in those sort of environments. So leaders now have to lead by example. And what they do should be the same purpose and values of the company. And everything then should be there, which is what will keep people working for certain companies, will give certain companies the edge, will give certain companies that interface with their customers, that their customers will become loyal, even though it's a very price-driven world at the moment. So, I think that, that leadership unlearning and then learning and relearning that you talk about is so important.
Yeah, but the other factor here is the new generation of people that we have, right? The young people.
Yep.
They're different. As you mentioned, if they come in the organization, they don't like it, they go. They don't hang around.
Yep.
So I think that itself, even the leaders need to adapt to that generation XYZ.
Yep.
That they have a different outlook in how they see themselves in an organization, and unless you can adapt to that, then you can't work with them.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I agree. I've got kids, I've got grandkids, it's incredible. Some of the things they say to me, they say, Dad, you can't say that. I said, no, hold on a second. I can say, I said, but what I don't do is I mustn't tell everybody else what they must do, but I can still have an opinion. And balancing those opinions and balancing those outlooks, we're in a sort of a seesaw level where we've got to wait for it to settle, and then once it settles, then we build on it. But whilst one is forcing another to have opinions that they don't want to have, and another one is not understanding that there is a certain balance that needs to be done, we're going through this. God knows how long it's going to take, but everybody has to do it differently. So that leadership unlearning and then learning and then relearning, that is all part of this journey, which is so important.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just hope that maybe we can help, with our experience and what we went through, so that others won't make the same mistakes, and it's a way of giving back to the industry.
Exactly. Now, let me ask you something. And you mentioned about the new generation and things like that. Now, one of the things that I've seen through many, many people that, I've admired, I think they're fantastic, is when they make an announcement that they're going to leave their business or leave their company, or somebody else says, so and so is leaving, taking early retirement. Almost from that day, it's as if they've been wiped off the portrait or the landscape that was hanging so proudly on the wall. And they start to go downhill quite quickly. And in some cases, you get bitterness. In some cases, you get, a sort of a longing. In some cases, you get regret. In some cases, happy days, can't wait to get out of here. But there's a very mixed bag of what happens. But isn't it so sad that those that then have to take up that responsibility or take up those roles, that they don't have a really nice period where one can learn from the passion and engagement and expertise of the other, so that they get a fast track like skills update that they can choose to learn from or relearn or whatever, that they can do that whichever way they like, and it's, I just think it's such a shame that that baton passing doesn't happen. And if it was a relay race now, our industry is almost like the third and the fourth leg are just throwing the baton on the ground and say, well, no, you want to take it, you pick it up, you finish it, instead of doing it nicely,
Well, sometimes people, when they're out of that environment they were in, they're suddenly lost because they don't know what to do. But the other part of it is, even now, for example, the new CEO in place still have sessions with me once in a while, seeking guidance on certain matters, and I still provide that feedback and guidance. And I got the blessing from the group that I will continue to guide him whenever he asks for it. But bear in mind, Chris, at the end of the day, when you put a new guy there, he always wants to build his legacy, right?
Yep.
So whatever you pass the baton to him, of course, we always think that whatever we pass is gold, right? But he might not see it that way, and it might not be true as well. So at the end of the day, there has to be a balance, as you said. When you pass the baton, are they willing to take it on and use it? They might take it on, but they might not use it because they want to create their own path. Or the other way is, some people just don't want to pass the baton because, hey, I learned the hard way. I have all this experience, and why should I just give it just like that? But that's the balance. I think sometimes we just need to come to, and in the COVID environment, I think we have to be realistic. I think people don't have time to learn. We just have to give them a quick formula, and if they take it, that's great, because things happening too fast. You can't wait to learn, and by the time you make the mistake and learn, the company is gone.
Yeah, and that's why Will, I think now is a great opportunity for you, like I said, leadership, unlearning, learning, and relearning. And I think what you've spoken about there is very accurate. And if people have got a different perception of what that ongoing coaching or access is, it could be very valuable for them, because it doesn't mean that you have to be given instructions. Not at all. But it does mean that this is what I'm now faced with. This is what I think I would like to do. Have you got any input from your experience as to what might be influencing factors or risks that I should perhaps take into consideration before I continue? So if that learning becomes something that can help both parties, it's very different. And it's that mindset of, I'm going, so I should tell him what he should do. And then the other one says, well, I'm new, I don't need to know what he's done because that's why he's gone. And it's that sort of, so if you're still doing that now, I think that's a lovely thing, And then another area that you cover was able to teach themselves to think. And I can remember looking back on some of the things I did, and you know, and with honesty, maybe I should have sat down and I should have, you know, thought myself or taught myself to think differently, and then create myself to be in a position where I could see what the outcomes would be before I made that decision. And I think, you know, it's a very wise few steps to take before you make the jump.
Yeah, and the ability to think, as simple as it sounds, is not easily trained or easily acquired.
Yep.
Because people tend to react rather than respond, and that's
Yep.
why we teach: don't react, respond. So take a step back, think about it, and it's all about your own paradigms, your own principles of how you deal with situations. So in a stressful decision, you might react rather than respond. But this thinking process, I feel, starts from when people are young. I still remember, as I said before, I think when my two boys were doing their A levels, they had to have this subject called thinking skills.
Yep.
As a subject. So they have to teach them how to think out of the box and not being stuck in a very rigid way. And it wasn't easy, especially in Asian culture. It's not easy. Your parents are so adamant that this is the right profession or this is the right career to have, and then you might want to be just a painter.
Yep.
So, you know, it's very different. But as we evolve and as things moved on, and when we look at it, and then we need to probably revamp the education system to then encourage creative minds. How do we encourage creative minds and independent thinking and thinking on a different perspective? It's not easy.
Yep. No, it's not easy at all. And it doesn't matter who we are or where we are. There are certain environments that, you know, you act differently than if you're in others. So 100% there. And then you also cover about learning to create and innovate with foresight in mind. And, you know, this, you know, creation and innovation, you know, keeping things fluid, making sure people are aware that things are going to progress and develop. It's so important to keep the whole employee group engaged and stimulated.
Well, I think as you say, the motivation has to be there for people to innovate. And the biggest downside of that is that people are fearful of making mistakes. But if you encourage them to say that if you don't innovate, we'll be still in the same boat, in the same rough seas, and you're going to be sinking. So you better innovate and try and create something new. But it's always easier said than done. But what we try to encourage is that we have these events, and we do hackathons, and we encourage scenario planning, and we stimulate the thinking. And we even have what we call tea time talks. We might just throw in a subject that is very typical, and then people give their opinions, and then we throw in the spanner, if you like, and say, hey, what if this was the other outcome? How would you tackle it? Then that enables people to start thinking for themselves. And it's something you have to cultivate, and it's not quite easy. But as I say, sometimes we tend to, I always have this fear when I do those tea talks, that you dominate the talking.
Yep.
And when you dominate the talking, the others end up listening. They don't talk. Then that's the end of it. How do you encourage people to contribute, to talk?
Yeah, and with different personalities and different traits, etc. Yeah, so important. And what you said there as well is, if you always do what you always did, you're always going to get what you always got. So it needs to have a big change. And then the fifth point, lead without influence. So again, that also comes into, you know, how you get other people to talk as well.
Yeah. And I think, but these days, I believe the younger generation are very vocal in their ways.
Yeah.
But there are also a lot of, I experience it when some of my head of departments tend to suppress the supervisor or the executive who's speaking out of turn, and they say, hey, you know, you shouldn't say this in front of the boss.
Yeah, and that's right. Yeah.
no, you should just say it out. I mean, we say what we want, we debate it, but we have to learn to accept whether we are right or wrong. And if it turns out we are wrong, we have to accept it. And once we leave the room, we wipe the whiteboard clean.
Yeah.
And that's it. We leave the room and it's all business. But
100%.
it's not easy to allow a young guy to come and tell you you're wrong. Not many of my head of departments could accept that. And it was difficult. Even I sometimes felt I was so right. But these guys, they tend, but I guess maybe one of the things I always did was that I always invited them to come to my office after 8 p.m. when everyone has left the office. So they didn't feel uncomfortable speaking when there were other people around. And it was just me and them in the office. Everyone has left the office and we just talk and feel comfortable that they can at least share their concerns and what their thoughts are, and why are we doing this? Why are we going so slow? We could go faster. And these young people is all bang, bang, bang. They just want to move ahead. And then you have to teach them how to connect the dots and so on. So those are the mentoring and coaching that needs to go on to create that innovative thinking and the ability to lead without influence.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and the bang, bang, bang is fantastic, and that's why it's so encouraging and so lovely to see. But I also used to tell people, look, if you're riding downhill on a push bike, okay, you'll gather speed and momentum like you're doing now, which is fantastic. But there's one thing on each side of the handlebars that is there for a purpose, and it's brakes. And every now and again, you need to apply the brake for a specific reason. So don't be thinking you can just keep. So the open floor area is also, it's encouraging, but it can also be very damaging, because you do get certain people who just want to keep boom, 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 boom. So they try and destroy the platform. So there's a huge balance that people need to be aware. And when people give their opinions or make a statement, lots of the times it's at the far extremes, which makes it either go like this or like this. Whereas the best way is near the fulcrum. So there's not so much of a great big impact, but it allows people to do it. Now, we're coming near to the end of the session, which has been brilliant. But your pyramid, where you've got lead, foresight, communication, think for yourself, and also attitude is everything. That big bottom section, attitude is everything. That is so important in all leadership and in all management. And if that attitude is not right, it doesn't matter what else you want, it's not going to be there. And so for me, attitude and aptitude is so important. And even with something that you mentioned earlier about data-driven decision making and gut feeling, sometimes you can see somebody, and if their aptitude and attitude is right, they're a better choice to take than somebody who's got so much qualification, because that is such an important ingredient in that success.
Yeah, I mean, I always show 3 circles intersect each other, and of course you have the skills and the knowledge and the attitude. So I always talk about hitting the housefly. So you have the skill, but you don't have the knowledge, but you have the attitude. You might not do it because you don't have one of the elements. You need all 3 elements as well. But as you say, it's very important. First building block is the attitude. If your attitude is right or aptitude is right, both attitude and aptitude, then you can build on that and then acquire the skills and knowledge, because those skills and knowledge can be acquired easily. Aptitude and attitude comes from within, and no one gives it to you. You have to have it. You have to create for yourself, and you must believe in yourself and have that paradigm shift that it's not always about me. It's not always about my way, but it can be any other. And at the end of the day, it's just making mistake. It's just a pathway to success.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. 100%. Yeah. And if you're not making mistakes, you're not learning, you're not growing, and you've got a limited battery of experience. So yeah. But obviously, the most important thing now is to appreciate from everybody's perspective how important it is to lead by example. I also think, Woo, that senior managers now more than ever, they need to spend more time on the ground with their workers, not in the ivory towers, looking at spreadsheet after spreadsheet after spreadsheet. They need to get away from this, I only need a 25,000 foot overview. I need all the information on half a sheet of paper, and if it takes you more than 2 slides, I'm not interested. No, they need to get back down in the mine shaft now, and they need to interact with their people, lead by example, and start to make things happen in a different way, because it's only that different way that's going to make things different moving forward.
And I think maybe because of the pandemic, I think a lot of things have changed. People can't move freely, even across borders, state districts, and so on. And how each company handles it is different. Just as we see how each country handles the pandemic is also very different. So the outcomes are different. So as you said, each company needs to find the right way to do it. And more than ever, as you said, you need to be on the ground to be in touch with the people, because apart from the impact of financial and financial and business impact to the organization, there's also emotional and psychological stress for the people.
Yep.
We have check-in people when I was in Post Aviation, and we were about to embark on even looking at psychological help, because these people face passengers coming on flight about their own health. They're thinking, I have aged parents, I have young kids at home, these people, and on the other hand, I'm not getting much work, so my pay is less, and I've got to feed people, but yet I have to do this, and I get exposed to the virus every day. So there's a lot of emotional and psychological stress. From that perspective for the worker. Of course, for the even for us at the very top, we still worry as to how do you come to that decision if you have to chop 30% of your workforce. How do you deal with that? Can you handle it? I mean, who do you choose? Who do you decide doesn't get a job? It's not easy.
No. I think anybody that's ever had to dismiss somebody, for something that they did terribly wrong, it's still tough and it's still hard because it affects other people. But when you've had to reduce the workforce or make people redundant, it's the hardest thing in the world. And I think any senior manager or any manager or anybody who's had to do it, if they don't feel that it's the hardest thing in the world, then maybe they're not doing it right either, because it needs to be taken very seriously, because it affects so many people. I think even with restricted travel now, Woo, there's a guy I know really well, and he's done something with his company whereby he's appointed somebody to do a video, like with a webcam. So he has to walk around the floor, the warehouse, he goes out on the ramp, he has to do it, but he's told what time to do it. He doesn't do it on a regular time. And so my friend, the boss, is sitting there watching everything just to see what's going on. And he's also got the audio, and he says, right, stop, please, go and I want you to go and talk to that particular, and he talks to him through the system at the time. So he looks for his own eyes and his own voice to be on the ground, even though he can't be there. And it's very, very different from doing these, bulletin updates and communication. And because of that interface, he's able to have a little personal contact with somebody and to show that he cares, but he's also able to then bring that into his communication update. So there's lots of creative ways of doing it, but it's a very difficult situation for everybody.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me, because when at one time we how we sometimes just send out memos and circulars, right? Then I did a recording.
Notice boards, read and sign.
And I just did a recording on my phone and I sent it out, and because I told them to hang in there, it's tough, it's difficult, but the company is working this way around, and people received it well. And the feedback was, it's more than just a message, because they see you talking, they see your expressions, and they see your kind of they know that you're trying and you care for them. That helps a lot. Big
word, care, Woo.
Yeah.
Easy to
Well,
say, difficult to show.
and for me, it's also difficult as a parent because I have my 2 boys with me, and I just want to mention this, that my
Your daughter.
is in Australia on her own.
Yes.
And I
And
haven't been able to see her for the last 18 months. And she hasn't been able to come back for the last 18 months. She has to make decisions, and she's there in a lockdown now, and things like that. But we as parents try to, as we deal with companies, right? We're CEO of a company and we control people, and but you cannot apply exactly the same thing to your children because they are slightly different. But at the same time, you're also worried, but are they doing the right things? Are they taking the safety protocols? Are they doing that? You worry. So yeah, Mayan is there on her own, and she's done great. She's learning to be a cook, but no job because lockdown.
Yep.
So what do you do?
You just have to look after it the best you can and keep communicating. And Mian, a message from me. We had a podcast a way back, and we were supposed to have mentioned you. It was my fault that we didn't, and apologies there. So please God.
No. It's just the same with me. We got excited. We started talking, and we went off, and we enjoyed it so much. And then suddenly we realized, oh shit, I have 2 boys and a girl. And the girl is always the one that thinking, and when is daddy coming home? And when they were young, the boys may not notice you come home, but the girl will always notice when you're around, and they have that. Girls are a bit different. So
they are different. Yeah, I've got one of each, and we've always had a saying that a boy's a boy till he meets his wife, but a daughter's a daughter for the rest of your life.
Oh, great way to say that.
They certainly change. They always, and especially for their dads. Woo.
Yeah.
Big spot for dad. So I think when you finish this now, you need to do a Zoom call with Mian and just tell us some special things.
Yeah, she's done great on her own, and I'm quite surprised she has done so much out there and being independent. And I think as parents, you always have this overbearing concern for them, but it's well, right?
Yep.
Chris, can you ever let go?
Pardon?
Can you ever let go?
I mean, it depends to what degree you call let go, Woo, but you always, that's something that I remember my poor old mother, God bless her, she always used to say, you'll never know until you have children of your own.
Very true. Very true. Yeah.
But it's a lovely rucksack to have on your back. So, it's a lovely thing. Listen, my friend, absolute pleasure. I wish you great success. And we used the word briefly there at the end about care. I know how much you care. And it was a wonderful time that we met, and we've had some fun, and the podcast was great. This one is, and please God, I hope to meet you somewhere soon.
Thank you. You keep safe, and I hope that whenever the light of the tunnel, when the recovery comes, whenever that is, but I think this has changed the world forever, and the best is to learn from it. And I hope to be able to pass on some of my experiences and things that I've learned along the way, and hopefully people don't repeat the same mistakes again. And that's the only way we can help, and that's how I see it.
No, 100%, Woo. And I think your experience is a very, very, very valuable safe that anybody who gets access to will be very, very pleased. So good luck with everything you do, my friend. Keep in touch.
Okay.
And thank you so much for coming on.
We'll have again sometime.
We will indeed.
Tea.
Yeah. We'll have something stronger than a cup of tea, Woo.
Thank you.
Thank you. All the best. God bless.